the last lecture, we talked about Leaning Tower of Pisa, and we have seen that how years of leaningness of that was ultimately diagnosed, and the solution was not so difficult, but the diagnosis and a proper investigation and a multidisciplinary team contributed and avoided a great disaster that could have happened. Today, we will take up another interesting case study, where we will see that how the investigation, research and years of understanding by a group of work can save a very important structure. So, and continue with the investigation, diagnosis and conservation measures. Today, we will talk about York Minster in York in North Yorkshire in England. If you can see that this is the place. This is one of the largest medieval buildings in the northern Europe. It's a beautiful cathedral, still functioning, but it has a very interesting story and lot of interesting stories. So, we will try to see that how and what is happening and what has happened. York Minster in peril. So, that was the news on the front page of the Yorkshire Evening Press on Friday, April the 7th, 1967. What it did say that Central Tower could fall after 15 years, and as you can see that the Central Tower is a very important, it's almost 60 meter of high, and if this sort of collapses, then it will be very difficult, and it's a disaster, because in the field of religion also and of England, it is very important, and it's a beautiful structure. So, this was the situation. You can see the cracks which happen, and there were cracks all over, but suddenly it found that the cracks probably it was widening, and I mentioned that when there are cracks, one has to understand whether there is a live crack or a dead crack. So, in 1966, when there was alarming signs, an inspection team on the Minster condition revealed cracking and severe distortion on the masonry around the Central Tower. It looked like the cracks were still continuing and there is danger. There is another event which has happened. We will talk about the crack later on, because we will take 2-3 instances what happened in York Minster. A great fire also happened in the very recent history of York Minster. That York Minster fire, which happened in 1984 on 2:30 a.m. in the night on Monday 9 July in 1984. It totally destroyed the south transept of York Minster. So, these are the two events or disasters which struck York Minster. We will talk about that one by one, and we will see that what has been done, how it has been diagnosed, and what are the conservation measures have been taken to bring it back to its former glory. So, before that, let us talk about or see that what is York Minster and what is its historical background, and what are the historical timeline, what it happened, what is its importance. So, this is a bird eye view of the York Minster in 2004. You can see it's a beautiful and it's a Gothic cathedral. It is the second largest Gothic cathedral of the northern Europe, and the present Gothic style church was built over 250 years between 1220 and 1472, but its history goes back much before that. It charts, and also why it is important is that it charts the development of the Gothic English Gothic style of architecture from early English through the perpendicular period. So, it has recorded, so it is very important architecturally also, rather than being a very important religious structure. So, let us see the historical background, that what happened to the site and how did this beautiful cathedral, Gothic style cathedral came about. The history goes back of that site goes back to 627 AD, when there was the first wooden chapel which was hurriedly constructed to baptize Edwin, the King of Northumbria. So, that was the first recorded history of this place. Later, it was replaced by a stone church built on the site of a Roman basilica. I think we have discussed about Yorkshire, that the Romans did come there, and you still find a lot of Roman ruins of that time. So, it is believed that it has replaced an early stone church which was built on a Roman basilica. 741 AD, the church was completely destroyed in a fire, and 1075 AD, it destroyed by the Danes during the turbulent period of William the Conqueror. Remember that the Jorvik Viking Museum, and which we discussed, and it actually, that time the Danes came and they actually conquered and they caused a mass devastation, and this actually, that church that time was destroyed, the early stone church was destroyed by the Danes. But again, it was rebuilt in the Norman manner favored by English new rulers. So, as the rulers were changing, the architecture style was changing, and accordingly the church also underwent the various reconstruction, restoration and repair and rebuild stage. 13th century, it was rebuilt in the Gothic style, which was very favored that time. And as you can see in this map or the plan of the Yorkshire, that you can see that clearly there was an early English period. So, this is the part which is an early English period, and then you can see that this is another period which is from 2018 to 1350, and the perpendicular style which we are talking about is this part which is shown in the red color. What is very important for this first example what we talk about, or first case or instance which we will talk about, is this portion, where the great tower or the square tower is happening. This is what it is today. It's beautiful interior, the grand scale, stained glass windows all over, the vault, cross vaults, decoration. Beautiful place it is, and still being actively used for religious purpose, as well as the tourists and visitors come there. So, let us talk about go back to that crack. Which was very alarming, and they said that it has a life only for 15 years. So, 1966, the Sir Vernon Fielded with his team inspected that. There was a various type of investigation which happened. So, it was found that the cracks and there was severe distortion of the masonry around the central tower. So, this is the central tower what we talk about, that this is the central tower, and this is, we see it in a section, and there were huge cracks which were evident that time. There is one sort of instrument which is called Dimick gauge, which actually is able to measure not only whether the cracks are live crack or dead crack. They also measure which direction the cracks are widening and whether the cracks are live crack or dead crack. That means whether the crack are still continuing or not. So, this was recorded with the instrument. The various cracks were recorded during that time, and in addition, also it was necessary to do an exploratory excavation adjacent to northeast pier, which revealed poor quality masonry foundation, badly distorted and cracked, because it was all happening. There were signs of cracks in the various parts, especially around the central tower, but also while this excavation was happening to explore that, to see the condition, it was found that the situation was very severe. There were large gaping holes within the foundation, and it was almost surprising that how this huge load was being still taken care of. Now, what was done is that 11 boreholes were drilled through the soil to investigate the ground strata. And you can see that this is the chart that the various types of ground strata are doing. So, it was found that the ground condition when these boreholes were dug, and it was found drilled through that it was not a similar condition. It was a very composite and a variable type of soils are there, and it was also found that taking the plumb line, the settlement was not equal. It was found that the piers of the central tower had settled up to 225 millimeter and the western towers up to 75 millimeter with respect to the nave. So, what is found out that the settlement which was happening is not equal. It was different in different parts of the huge structure. And if you see the different types of clay, we can clearly see that there are boulder clay, there are the different types of sand, 5 sand which are there, and there are silt also which are there, different types of clay which are there. So, it was a very composite type of soil which happened. Now, let us look at the plan of the we have seen earlier. So, it was found that there is a plan which showing the relationship of the present York Minster to the underlying Roman and Norman construction. As we saw the historical record, that there were various types of structures which are there. They were not so big, small, wooden and stone, and they were rebuilt and they were destroyed. So, and they had their own foundation, and on part of that these huge structure came up, and also in stages. So, here you can see that it showed how the present that for the central tower which is there, how it is that superimposed on the Norman foundation, and it is not actually matching. So, part of the two of the towers are on the Norman foundation and the other towers were outside the Norman foundation. And also this Norman foundation, the way it was built, it was very different. They were used to have wooden piles, and this wooden pile also changes their condition because of the groundwater level. So, there was also a change in the groundwater level of this city because of the urbanization and other factors. Now, you can see another section here which shows the northwest pier which is there, the foundation of that, and how there in an oblique manner it is positioned on the Norman tower. So, it is partly on that. So, of this central tower of the 4 piers, 2 are on the foundation of the Norman pier and the 2 are outside the foundation of the Norman pier. And these, it was a lot of structural calculation, study, analysis was done along with the investigation plan line, the depth and the settlement. It was found that there was definitely an unequal settlement because of this ground strata and the different types of foundation and different types of buildings which were there, because it was inhabited right from the beginning. So, different types of constructions were happening on the same site. Now, what was done is that to diagnose what was the cost, it was understood that it was due to a different settlement. What was done here, there is a hypothetical reconstruction of the settlement since 1080. So, this was done according to a timeline, and that what was the settlement. The churches are very good in keeping the records. So, they had their records, and if you see that initially this sort of a settlement was there during the construction of the normal cathedral. And then there was a time when it was a sort of a almost it changes, it becomes slower, but again in this time there was also a collapse when because about 1400 AD there was an attempt to style the main powers, and there was a central tower's collapse. So, that is the history which we found there. But also then after that certain settlement happened, but again as we can see here that at this point that there was a differential settlement of the northeast and the northwest pair. So, I mean, but that also stabilized over this period of 1500 to almost middle of 1900, it almost settled. But around that time in 1960, suddenly it was found that the settlement was suddenly sharply happening. So, this was became us, but it was from all this reconstruction and diagnosis and various types of investigation, excavation which happened, it was found that it was decided, or they came to a conclusion that the cracking of the central tower was entirely the result of a differential settlement of the piers, and the footings were overloaded. So, this was the diagnosis after a sort of a multidisciplinary team working for a long time and different types of investigations which happened. Now, the question comes, so the diagnosis investigation was there, then the diagnosis was done. Now, the question comes, what can be done? What are the remedial measures? Because otherwise, this type of crack happened, it is definitely bound to collapse. So, most of the thing in the available solution in such cases is underpinning. Underpinning is that we sort of strengthen the foundation, construct foundation from beneath and make it stronger, because it is not able to take the load any further. And for the underpinning also, there are different alternative scenarios are there. They were discussed, various options were tried, discussed about that, and then ultimately a particular solution was decided. And in this case, it was realized that because this type of composite soil and a huge structure is there, the moment the underpinning will be done, this will also create a further stress on the surrounding condition or the adjacent structures or the parts of there, and that can create a further problem. So, the thing is that even if we strengthen the foundation from beneath, the underpinning, that will create a stress on the soil. But how to sort of reduce that impact became a challenging situation, and for that it was decided that there will be pre-stress. What actually done, if you can see here, that this is the northern pier which was existing, this is the Norman foundation. So, what was decided that to put it in a sort of a concrete collar and widen the foundation from beneath and from the side, and then so that these new portion and the old portion can work in unison, and whenever it will like to press the soil and there will be a settlement, the moment there is a settlement happening, there will be a sort of an adjustment, so that the differential settlement is not much. It will sort of an adjustment will be there, and that adjustment will be done by the flat jacks which were inserted, and that flat jacks will again try to counterbalance the settlement which will happen. So, if you see the section here, so this is the northern pier and this is the Norman church, this was the old sort of a foundation which was there. So, now what is being done is that this extra sort of a part which was constructed, and this extra part which was constructed had two parts. One is this part and another is a lower part, a platform. In between are these flat jacks which were inserted, and they had a sort of lubricant. So, the moment is trying to sort of settle down and put a pressure on the soil, these flat jacks will sort of give a pressure, so that the differential settlement is not happening. And also there were sort of a bar, priestess bars, which will be horizontal bars, which will be put through the old foundation and the new foundation, so that as a whole they work in unison. So, this is a clearer picture that what is happening to the old foundation and the new foundation, the underpinning, the priestess, what has happened, and you can see that this is the old section, and then the new section is coming up there, and there were these bolts, horizontal tie members, or the things which is going through that, and in this new section also there are two parts. In between there are flat jacks which we again try to, because whenever there is a pressure on the soil, there will be some adjustment happen, there will be settlement. Now, the question here is to how to reduce the impact of the differential settlement, and that actually was sort of tried in this restoration of the York Minster's underpinning. So, now what is the process? Each of the central tower pier was supported on a square footing, and the Norman footing was encased in the concrete, as I showed in the section, and the horizontal holes drilled through the resultant composite footing, so that they work in unison, and the pre-stressed bar were inserted into the ducts, and the whole together pre-stressed with the flat jacks in stages, and this was happening in stages, not at one go, so that it takes time, but it will try to settle and the crack does not happen farther, and there is no further differential settlement. It was a marvelous feat of structural genius. It was done with Orup Associates and Sir Bernard Fielded as a teamwork, and this was really appreciated all over, and it became an exemplary work of foundation strengthening and saving York Minster from collapsing. But another very wonderful thing happened when this excavation was doing for the investigation and other, and the foundation and the basement was created. It could have been filled up. There was a marvelous sort of a innovative idea that this undercroft, which has been created because of that excavation, it was converted into a museum to show the, it was done for the emergency excavation, but it was to show the 2000 years of heroic, historic and human journey through a series of interactive underground chambers. It is very interactive. You can also see the old Norman foundation, the Norman foundation, the restoration which has happened is clearly visible, and one can move through that undercroft and see what has happened. And this explores the hidden history of the cathedral site, from the remains of a Roman barracks to the foundation of the Norman Minster. And thousands of visitors come visit the undercroft. The Friends of York Minster, there is a society, it raises fund. At the same time, it works as a religious place, the choir and the sacred practices all happen. So, it is a wonderful example that such a huge impact which was going to happen, it was going to collapse, and how through a proper investigation, a diagnosis and understanding the research of the historical records which were found, the understanding of that what is happening and trying to find out that what can be the solution. It was no normal fit, it was a fantastic structural thing, but what also is very important to see that not only it stopped there, it tried to take that opportunity and the excavation which was created to convert into something for interpretation, bringing it to the public's notice and create a beautiful journey through history. And that is one of the restoration measure which happened in York Minster. We also mentioned about a fire. We will talk about that in our next lecture.